You do. Hey, everybody.
It's bait and switch.
It is. So good morning, Cam and Ivan. Cravens is teaching from his computer. Can you hear me?
We got
Okay.
you. Sound good.
Okay, good. So I'm going to walk away from the computer now.
Nobody won't let anybody.
So when you share screen, right, you'll have to share your screen down
Okay.
there if you want them to be able to see what you're doing.
Can y'all
Okay.
see my screen?
You have to pick which one you want to share. Is it that?
I just see you in your blurred background.
Which one are you wanting?
That
to-
one, the one that's highlighted.
Okay, then click share.
Oh, okay, sure. Did it share?
It did.
It did. I got all your open and tabs.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's do this.
Can you see the presentation?
I can. It's like an open window on his screen, but yeah, I can see it. There we go. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Cam.
Thank you.
All right, you're all set.
Okay, so we got a few more minutes, I think. So I'll be right back. There might be a few people that'll dial in or just come later. So anyway, I'll be right back.
Sounds good, man.
Hey guys, showing up for class here. People online.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm back. So, who do we have on here? We got Carrie inside. We've got Tony inside. We've got Ryan, Arthur, and somebody else is trying to.
Do you want to set
Come
it
in.
up on the screen share?
Yeah, it's on there, right?
Well, right now it looks like you're on your computer.
Hey, do y'all see it as a screen share?
Yeah, I see it.
You see
Yep.
it? You see commercial basics?
Yep.
Yep, you see it? Okay, okay, good. Okay,
morning.
all right, well then I guess we'll get started. My name is Cravens Doggett. I'm a commercial agent here at the Chat North office, and so commercial is all I do. I don't do any residential. I just don't understand it, so it's good I stay in my lane. So what I have in front of y'all right now is kind of the commercial basics, and that was what I did the first time. I don't know, some of y'all might have seen this already, but I was just going to go through the recap of it, just kind of go over it real quick, and then we'll dive into the part two, which I know everybody is so excited about. So, all right, so real basic stuff, type of asset classes. We have industrial, office, retail, hospitality, self-storage, mixed use, and there's some other specialties, but that's kind of, those are the main food groups. And then this is kind of an example of what we would consider industrial. I mean, you have stuff that's class A that pension funds and insurance companies tend to buy. And then you have, some of lesser class, but still good returns and things like that, but more of individual investors. And then office, same thing. You have, typically A, B, C quality. I wish they had more letters because, some of them just don't fall in that category. Retail, again, same thing, A, B, C. This Whole Foods, probably part of a mixed use. And then, you have Lululemon, it's probably in a high-end retail center. And then you have this one here on the left that's, I think that's actually in Sewanee.
Which one would you?
So, yeah, it's a good question. So like on this particular one, this one over there on the left, that would be more of a B. And then Lululemon would be in an A center, and Whole Foods would be in an A center as well. I don't have necessarily example of a C in this particular this slide. But a good question. I just don't have the right picture of it. So anyway, hospitality is basically hotels, casinos, things like that. I think the one down at the bottom right is Bellagio in Vegas, and then you'll have some of these buildings on the left that that'll have an office and a hospitality component where you could have an office building and then it's directly connected to like a hotel. And yeah, yep. And there's one in Houston, like the Omni. Omni is another good example.
Right.
You have the hotel and you have the office there as well, and it's all part of the same thing. All right, we're kind of busting through these just because this is the first one. And then you have self-storage. The bottom right is more or less a first generation, I would say B or C kind of quality. And then the others are more examples of A, and those are for institutional investors. Although individual investors can, buy anything, right? It's just they get expensive. And then mixed use projects, you've seen these, the Avalon here, kind of at the Forum, that's kind of considered a mixed use. You have retail, you have office. Hey there, how are you?
Great, sorry.
That's okay. We're just going over the first, which you were a part of, so you didn't miss anything. Activities in the commercial world. You can do leasing, you can be on the tenant side, you can be on the landlord side, purchase and sale, you can be buyer side, seller side, investment sales. These are triple net partial, partial responsibilities, no responsibilities. It just depends. But again, that's a part of the purchase and sale. And then you have development. A triple net deal is an investment where the landlord really doesn't have any responsibilities. So like the tenant is responsible for, all the utilities that it needs. It pays for all the pass-through expenses. In an absolute triple net deal, the tenant, and it's usually a single tenant deal where structurally the tenant pays for everything. Roof blows off, the tenant pays for it, everything. That's an absolute net deal. The landlord is just collecting rent. They pay for everything, taxes, insurance, and responsible for everything. If a tornado takes down the building, they still paying rent. So yeah, and it's good for investors that just want to diversify their overall investment portfolio and not really have any, they don't have to have any experience in real estate. They just collect a check. Yeah, but it's good for cash flow. So some of these cap rates are low, but it's better than, some of the bonds out there. And you might have more or less a similar credit, depending upon how you view the government credit. So anyway, commercial terms, cap rates, internal rate of return, cash on cash. These are all more like investment terms. We kind of touched about triple net, absolute net, double net, and all these double net, single nets. Those basically break down more or less, what the responsibilities of the tenant and the landlord are. And when they're double net and single net, they're kind of split. CAM, we probably heard this, common area maintenance. That's just things like landscaping, common lighting, things like this. If you look at this building that we're at in the forum, the common areas are all the lighting that's out in the parking lot, any of the bathrooms, the lobbies, all that is common area. Operating expenses are the expenses that are associated with operating the building. It does not include debt, and it does not include any kind of capital expenditures. Like if, let's say the building needed a new roof, that's not considered an operating expense because it's not ongoing. Well, at least you hope it's not ongoing. And so that's a one. Yeah, that's the one you keep patching. And that's still better not be included in the operating expense. Well, it should be a capital investment, and any kind of repairs like that, they will push those through. But I mean, if they keep patching over and over again, you need to bring that to their attention. Says, because all these expenses are going to be passed through to the tenant.
It'll be capital expenses or capital?
Well, okay, so a repair for a roof, let's say, they're going to consider that as an operating expense to a degree, so they'll pass that on. If it becomes a regular occurrence, they need to shift that to a capital expense and replace it and not pass that on. And landlords, tend to not want to spend any money. So that's important to know if you're ever representing, a tenant, knowing who the owner is and how well capitalized they are and how willing they are to pay for things is important to know. And if they're local or if they're out of town. Again, all right, so commercial terms continued. We got discount rates, debt constant, co-tenancy clause, kick-out clause. Real quick, discount rates are the amount of money an investor wants to make. A debt constant is the percentage that you pay throughout your debt. Co-tenancy clause is, and I know I'm burning through these, but this is just review, kind of what we're doing. Co-tenancy clause is related to retail, and that's a lot of these big boxes. So like, let's say a Kohl's has a co-tenancy with Target. So if Target goes out, leaves the center, then Kohl's has the ability to leave the center. So
They are the anchor.
they're the anchor, but they They rely on each other. So it's a co-tenancy. It's like a symbiotic relationship. I need you, you need me, you leave, I'm, not good, and the vice versa. So they have these co-tenancy clauses against each other. So if one leaves, they can all leave, and that provides a domino effect. And lenders really hate those because, one tenant leaves, it's a domino. Next thing you know, you have a empty center.
Kind of like is that an example of like one of the range from like 400 where there was target there, it left and entirely.
So that's another thing too. Okay, so that's a different scenario in that, yeah, if the anchor leaves and they don't necessarily have a co-tenancy, but all the people leave because the anchor's gone, they're going to go out of business. Not because there's a kick out clause, but they just went out of business, relying on,
Nobody's coming to.
yeah, nobody's bringing anybody there.
Smaller shops out here in the corner, they probably wouldn't have that.
You would never allow any kind of a smaller tenant to have any kind of co-tenancy. The only one that could possibly pull its weight would be like a Lululemon, a Chipotle, or something like that, where they really like those. It is somewhat of a draw, things like that. But if you're not, if you're only making up maybe 2 or 3% of the overall, space, they're not going to do it. I don't care who you are. Let's see.
I got a quick question for you, Cravens.
Yeah.
So would that be like in the case with like a Publix, where Publix opens up a Kroger, then you have the nail salon and the Chinese salon and the wing joint and whatever. So would Kroger and Publix be like that anchor?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And those are the best centers for those kind of tenants, because they say that an average person goes to the grocery store roughly 3 times a week. So you may not want the nail service every time you go to the grocery store, but when you think about when you do want your nails done, you're like, oh yeah, I know, it's by it's more like a billboard. And then when you decide you need that service, then you remember to go there. It's kind of
Gotcha.
yeah. Yep, good question. And then rent ratio is, again, more or less related to retail. I mean, it should be related to any business, but it's more important to retail. So what it is, rent ratio, real quick, is just the amount of money you pay in rent and pass through expenses divided by your overall revenue. And every industry has its own sweet spot of a rent ratio. So restaurants tend to not want to go higher than 8%. Sweet spot is 6.5% or below, just because of the expenses, employees, and things like that. That tends to be, you have a more survivable chance if your rent stays within that ratio. Percentage rent, again, more or less on tenant side, that's called a participation rent. In other words, the better the tenant does, the better the landlord does. Let's say you go in and you're trying to place a retail tenant into a particular center, and the rent is just expensive. We get out of whack on our rent ratio, but we're willing to give it a shot. We think that there's a good chance that we're going to be very successful. So what you do is you get that lower rate, but I will pay you X amount of any revenue I do over a certain amount. So we're kind of holding hands in this situation. You take a chance on me, I take a chance on you, and it all works out, hopefully. So that's kind of a percentage rent. TIA or TI, tenant improvement allowance, that's just basically build out cost on the front end. Like, there's no real perfect spot, for anybody in particular, unless it's built specifically for you and your use. So even if you have the right square footage, the right location, we might have to move the bathroom, or we might have to add a wall or two or something like that. So in a lot of cases, the landlord will help pay for the improvements that the tenant requires to do their business.
Got a question for you, Craig.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, how has COVID impacted commercial office space? I know a lot of people, you know, who are working in these buildings, they're working from home. And
Yeah.
what would you say would be the anticipated outlook for the future as we move forward post-COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think anybody really has a good answer right now. I think you have a couple of things going against you as far as like office. One of the dynamics is you have a very tight labor market, right? And the employees are kind of running the situation here. Like if I want to work from home and I'm considered a valuable employee, they're going to let me work from home because, you know, it's hard to replace me, let's say, you know, and there are a lot of out there. I mean, I don't know if you can talk to anybody out there that has a business, and the biggest complaint is they can't find anybody to work. So right now, business owners and things like that are more accommodative to that particular amenity, like working from home, big deal. So what does the long-term future hold for office? I mean, you know, if this labor market continues to be very tight, then I mean, there's going to be some vacancy. And then when those leases come due, and you know these companies haven't figured out, you know, how to get people back into the office, they're going to reduce their footprint. You know, I was on a property tour several months ago in Midtown, which is the best office market right now in Atlanta, and the occupancy is in the 90%, but only 35% at that time were being utilized. Like only 35% of the people of that 90% were actually coming to the office. So that can be disheartening, you know, as landlord, because if the ship doesn't get righted, you know, come lease expiration, you know, they're going to be staring at a lot of vacancy, or could. So that was a long way of saying, I don't know. There are too many factors that
Okay.
Can muddy the waters, I think.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, a good question. Zoning, real quick. Every municipality, whether it be the county or the city, has a particular zoning to allow a certain use. Like you have C2, C1, light industrial, heavy industrial, and it depends on, you know, what it is that a particular company wants to do. They have to have the right zoning for it. And if there isn't the right zoning for it, they might have to go in front of a board and do a rezoning or special use or conditional use. And that can take time and money and lawyers and everything else, right? Insurance, everybody's got to have insurance, things go bad. And this is some of the marketing stuff. KW commercial prices cost co-stars $300 a month now. LoopNet, the one in red, is $75 a listing, and then Crexy is $275 a month. So to be in this business, there are a lot of fees. So I'm going to do this. All right. Any other questions? I know I went through that real fast just because that was the first part, and then we can kind of dive more into the other.
Which one?
So CoStar, the little circle thing, and I guess I'm colorblind, so it might be blue or black. I can't really tell. Yeah, okay. And yeah, for research, analytics, things like that. Comps, you know, comparable sales. It's the most common, but it's the most one that everybody just has the biggest indigestion over. I mean, it's so expensive, and they just keep raising the rates. And I do a lot now with Crexy. Yeah.
This is like the FMLS of residential.
Yeah, it's a multiple listing service. Yeah, that's it. Yes, sir. All right, let's see. Go into. Oops. All right, so commercial basics, part 2. So this part is just more related to some of those terms that we went over, like net operating income, debt service coverage ratio, things like that. So, and this is more geared to like investment sales. Okay. And I know a lot of people out there have clients that are looking to invest in commercial property, whether it be a warehouse, a retail center, self-storage, whatever the case may be. So I thought I might talk a little bit more about some of the things that'll come up. God bless you. So we'll go over the following terms like cap rates, internal rate of return, cash on cash, discount rate, equity multiple, net operating income, debt service coverage ratio, and a debt constant. Some of these, I can ask anybody, but has anybody not heard of all these?
I've not heard of all.
Yeah, which ones have you not heard of? Okay. Anybody else? Debt constant, okay. They're not as common. Yeah, go ahead. Was somebody trying to say something?
Equity multiple.
Equity multiple, yep. Yeah, you don't hear that every day. Okay, good. Well, I mean, I would be like, if you knew all what these are, I think I'd just close it up and say, all right, we're good. All right, so we're gonna go to probably the most common one, the cap rate. And basically the cap rate is this, the amount of money you're gonna make on an unleveraged investment. So if you bought something for $1 million and you made $100,000 before taxes, that we would call that a 10 cap. You're making 10% on that and no debt. I spent $1 million and I'm getting $100,000 a year, let's say.
Like the most desired cap rate, right?
It's good.
It is the minimum. I mean, I feel like everybody says you want a 10% cap rate, but like how often are you getting?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that go into the cap rate, and that might even be another session or whatever. But there's a lot that goes into how you arrive at the cap rate, and it has to do with the amount of term that's left on, your leases, and it has to do with the credit quality of your tenant too. So those are the two main things that kind of affect a cap rate. All right, so let's see. Internal rate of return. So really the internal rate of return is a measure that, is the amount of money you're going to make on an investment. And it assumes that all the cash flows that you make off that investment are going to go into another investment with that same return, which is very hard to do. So every matrix that you use to try to determine, what somebody's rate of return is, nothing's perfect. Okay. There's nothing perfect out there. And a lot of people say the internal rate of return is a little bit of smoke and mirrors, but as long as you evaluate every investment opportunity the same way, you're comparing apples to apples. You don't want to do a cash on cash with one deal and internal rate of return on the other, and vice versa. So as long as you're consistent in your valuation, you should be okay. But here's an example. If you invested like that, I'm going to try to stay along the same lines of that $1 million investment, that we started initially. So if you invested $1 million and you receive 100,000 the first year, 103, 106, and so on and so forth, and in year 5 you make 112, 550,000, and then you sell it for 1.7 million, then your internal rate of return based on the amount of money that you invested will be roughly 20.25%. And this is how people do quick, down and dirty, back of the envelope kind of returns.
Run through those numbers.
Okay, so for instance,
Obviously, get 3,000, 6,000, 9,000, 12,000.
so
Is that just inflation?
no. So here's what happens. It's like, let's say you bought a retail center, right? And most of the leases in there are going to have some sort of rate increase. So the amount of money that you're going to make in the first year is going to increase the second year and the third year and the fourth year and so on and so forth. And all the expenses that are associated with that particular investment are passed on through the tenant. So the tenant has to pay those. So your money just increases because they're taking care of all the other stuff. So your cash flow goes in year 1, 100, and then this is basically the example that I used in this case is a 3% increase year over year. Okay, so this is just, and that's pretty good. I mean, most leases, most rent rates right now are increasing 3%. Inflation is higher, so we might see bigger increases, an annual increase for tenants now having to pay that, because historically speaking, real estate investments perform better in an inflationary environment because they're not fixed, right? They increase. And a lot of times, if you look back in the day, the increase of the rent was based on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So if we really did that, then we're looking at 8%. You know what I mean? So I mean that's a little bit hard to stomach. So 3% is reasonable, but it's creeping up to 5. I mean, we haven't experienced inflation in a while. Here it is. And so with that, you have an increase in value. And then on year 5, you received 112,550, and let's say you made $1.7 million when you sold it. Because when you do these investments, you may hold this thing forever. It may be something you pass down to a generation or whatever, a legacy. But when you do an investment, you always have to project some sort of a sale, whether it be a 5, 7, 10, whatever, even though you plan on keeping it forever. And then in this case, we invested $1 million and then sold it in year 5 with all those cash flows. So roughly you're making 20% year over year. Not bad.
But tell me, on the math portion, how did you get to 20%?
Okay, so what it is, it's based on a time value of money. So you discount those cash flows, back to day one. It accounts for that. And then again, it's also assuming that those cash flows, remember I kind of gave that caveat, that those cash flows are going into another investment making 20%.
So your 3% each year is,
That's the cash flow that you actually receive.
and then the profit that you made off the sale equals the 20%.
Right. The biggest part of your internal rate of return is going to be your sale. I mean, it just is. And that's why that's why there are a lot of different matrices to determine if you're actually making money or not
So
making
the
money.
20% is not necessarily the year to year 3%
It's averaging, it's based on this, right? And we talked about the flaws in it too.
Right.
But this is basically making 20% year over year. And this is one way to measure that. Okay.
But
You-
Rule 72 says that 20% will double.
Yeah, and then we could talk about like the equity multiple and things like that, but you're at 72, that talks about stocks and things like that, any kind of investment.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if I'm taking 20% in 5 years. That was $1 million, double, 2 million. You got another year and a half. So that's what I guess, add up all those 100, 360, add all those up and add those to the 1.7. That would be 20% a year on to start with.
That's what it is over that 5-year period. You're gonna make more than $1 million, obviously.
But yeah,
Yeah. But it's just what you're making on your money. And then when we go over this, it'll go into equity multiple, because a lot of people, like not a lot, but some investors, they don't care about internal rate of return. All they care about is when I'm going to get my money back and what year am I going to get my money back. To them, this is smoke and mirrors. You know, you can put in whatever you want, 20, 30%, but when am I going to get all my money back? You know, anybody watch Shark Tank? Same thing. Mr. Wonderful, when am I getting my money back?
First thing.
You know, first thing you ask. So 20% annually, not a bad deal, right? But most of it's going to be based on this year 5, and anything past the day is a guess. We don't know if we can get 1.7 million, you know, we just have to adjust, you know, what cap rates might be in 5 years, you know, that sort of thing. But again, as long as you're evaluating each investment the same way, you will have a winner and a loser. All right. Any other questions about that? Nope. Okay.
The most common thing they're looking for as an investment point of view is cap rate. They're not looking for either cash on cash or cap rate. Right? Most important.
Cap rate is going in. That's the going in rate. And then these are the other matrices is once you're in the investment. Like, this is what I'm going to pay going in, but what does it look like once I'm in the investment? You know? And the reversion too. Like, you also use a cap rate when you sell it too. That's just the beginning and the end. It's like what's happening in the middle kind of thing. All right, so cash on cash, kind of easy. It's the amount of money you make on a leveraged investment. So let's take this $1 million that we've already, you know, as an example. You put down $200,000. So you're going to borrow $800,000, and the first year you made $38,147 after the debt's paid, after everything's paid. This is what you're making, right? You made $38,147. So you take that amount and divide it by the actual cash you put into the deal, which is the $200,000, and that is 19%. Okay, and then next year it'll be higher based on, you know, the things that we talked about. But this is a matrix that a lot of people use. Like, I put down 200, but the misnomer is like, yeah, but I paid $1 million, and all I'm getting is 38,000. And I go, that's not fair to the investment. You only put in 200. You only put in 200.
It's leverage.
Yeah, and you bought it. And this is after the debt service. We didn't even talk about the pay down of the debt. I could add that into the return too, if you want. I don't like doing that just because depending upon the value of the asset, you never know if you're above water, below water. So let's just leave the pay down of the debt for another day. But so I've seen it a lot of times when they see this first number, like they're 38,000 and I bought it for $1 million, that's nothing. But you got to educate them and say, but you really only did 200,000. And that, in this case, it'll give you 19%, not bad. So a discount rate is the amount of money you want to make, right? Everybody has like a rate of return that their money makes for them. My money makes 5% for me. Your money makes 10% for you. Whatever it is, but each individual person has their own idea of what their money should make. And In this particular example, I used 8%. Okay, so if an investment gives $100,000 the first year, 103 the second, the same cash flow that we talked about, and 636 the fifth year, and you want an 8% annual return, you can pay $778,469 for this investment. So it's a way to back into like you'll look at investment and you'll say, this is the amount of cash flow we are projecting this to make. And my money is supposed to make X amount. So I'm only going to put in this amount of money, right? And then you negotiate whether that works or not on the investment deal. Does that make sense? Or y'all have any questions? I know I'm going through kind of fast.
Purchase price is 78.
Yes. If you want to make 8% on your money, and these are the cash flows you project for a 5-year period, you'll only want to pay $778,000 for this investment.
Versus the million.
Right.
So how did you get to the 636, 270 in the fifth year? That seems to be like a, I don't know, like a huge jump from year 1, 2, 3.
Because you sold it in year 5.
Oh, okay, got you. Cool.
You sold it. Remember, we've got to have some sort of sale date on this. Whether I use 5,
Okay.
just for say the simplicity terms. So the whole period, most whole periods are between 5 and 10 years. That's why, in commercial lending, you could have a 25-year amortization schedule, but the loan is going to balloon in 10 years. They're not going to keep that money out there forever. It's not going to be a true, no, you could get a true 15 or a true 10, but once you get beyond 15 years, that bank, because we don't, we're not using Fetty or Freddie or any of these others, you know what I mean? I mean, we can get into the CMBS market and things like that where it's a little bit different. But for the most part, when you're going to Synovus or, a local bank, they'll give you an amortization schedule anywhere between 20 and 25, but it's going to have some sort of maturity. It's going to have some sort of maturity. And so we sold this in year 5 and we got 636 with the sale and the cash flow, and 8%, we can pay $778,000.
We bought it for 778. 5 years later, we're selling 636.
No. What it is, this is a reverse order, right? We're looking at a particular investment and we project we'll make 100,000 in the first year, 103, so on and so forth, and we'll sell it plus the cash flow in the 5th year. This is what we're projecting. In order for me to make 8%, I can't pay more than 778,000 in order to achieve my 8% return. So we're backing into it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So instead of cap rate in the beginning, this is just cap rate, it's just you want to do.
Yeah, so again, some people don't want to look at the cap rate. They'll just take the investment and predict or underwrite it, what we call underwriting. And we'll underwrite it and we'll try to think, all right, project out. Again, anything past today is a guess. So it's all smoke and mirrors, but you have to have some sort of assumptions, right? So you assume that this investment does X, and if my money needs to get this, then I'm only going to pay that. All right. Okay, equity multiple. Back in, Mr. Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful. When am I going to get my money back? Right. So you invest $1 million and you receive 100,000 the first year. Your equity multiple will be 10%. Basically, you'll get 1/10 of your money back, and it's real simple. In that, in year 2. You're going to get, based on the 100,000 that you got the first year, plus the cash flow that you got in the second year, you're slowly chipping away. So in year 2, you'll have gotten 20% of your money back. And then you can just show as the cash flows, and it'll mark which year, you'll actually get your money back. And some people have a very tight frame. I want my money back in 3 years. Well, I mean, there are not a lot of investments that'll do that, so they don't even consider, the money, the cash flows that we talked about, in the previous examples. They don't even consider that money that they made. All they consider that is, I got my money back. I hadn't made one penny yet. And you just have to adjust. You just have to figure out what it is your client, what's important to them. Because some people would be like, oh, this is wonderful. I mean, I put in $1 million, I got this money back, making $100,000, da 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 da. And then there's some like, I didn't make one dime. Not until the entire thing is paid back do I consider myself making any money. Exactly. And it just really depends. Exactly. And it just really, it's kind of one of those education things that you have with your client and saying, what matrix do you typically use to determine if you're going to invest in something? And if it's an equity multiple, it's going to be tough. I'll tell you.
Because then protecting you're not going to make money.
Yeah, they don't return it. They look at it as return of capital as opposed to return on capital. And that's a very different thing. Those are very different. But most people are just looking to get a cash flow and things like that. And they look at it like a return on their investment. But again, you know your client.
Leverage more of it.
Yeah, you could certainly leverage more, but I mean,
You're gonna make more money if you leverage more.
right. And that's a great point as far as, what your rate of return is as opposed to what your interest rate is on your loan. Because there is a thing called negative leverage. Like if we talk about a cap rate of 5 and your lending rate is 5.25, that's negative leverage. And it's usually a no-go at that point. So no matter how much you leverage, it's not going to make sense. So you just need to make sure that there's a spread between your cap rate and your interest rate. And a lot of times, though, I mean, a lot of banks don't want you over leverage. 2008 happened a long time ago, but it's fresh in everybody's mind. That was too much leverage.
Right.
Yeah, they want skin in the game. There's some other matrices that they will continue to monitor their investment to see if it's meeting those thresholds. And in commercial lending, you can never miss a payment and still be in default. How's that?
Oh, what?
Yeah, like if you've made, like you have some financial covenants that you would have to adhere to. But let's say just for simple terms, you've never missed a mortgage payment, right? The bank's getting their money, but you could technically be in default because your asset is not performing the way it should. And they get nervous. You might have come off the hip and said, okay, I'm going to feed this thing. You know what I mean? And they don't want that. They want this particular asset to perform and go on its own.
They want to come from the asset.
As exactly. Because again, 2008, as long as it was, still a problem.
Well, they let commercial situations, they let you use equity for investment, but down payment.
Doubtful.
Okay.
Doubtful.
Because in residential, that's very common.
Yeah.
Every year to make, like rental properties, like multiple investment properties.
Yeah,
You
because
use your levies.
well,
Wanting other people to pay.
right. But when you take equity from another investment, you're technically borrowing it, and then you have that interest to pay. So now you've almost complicated your problem. I'm gonna pull out my equity, right? Which I have, unless you do a cash out refi, which nobody really does in the commercial market anymore. So if you say, I have equity over here and I get a line of credit, based on that equity, then you put that over to this deal. That's another problem because now you're paying interest on this deal plus this deal. It's a whole, situation. It's another debt. And if this asset doesn't perform, guess what? You're bringing down that one too.
Based on the debt ratio, right? It all depends on the debt ratio. You
Yeah.
can afford to pay that and this. Your business is, the first one's doing great and has tax return and all that, putting positive cash flow for a year, 5 years, the bank wouldn't have an issue. It all depends on that ratio.
And it might be a situation where, you know what, let's just refinance this whole
Yeah.
thing. But the only thing you want to worry about though, you don't, and I've seen it happen a lot, and banks love to do this. They love to cross collateralize. And
Yeah.
I would definitely tell you not to do that. Never do that if you can't help it. Now, you might be in a situation where that's your only lifeline. Well, then you take it. If that's the only, life preserver coming out, well, it's either that or drown, either way, right?
Never forget a banker's model. Never alone.
Yeah, right. So net operating income, and this is probably one of the most important things out there. It's the gross revenue minus the operating expenses. And what that is that's your net operating income, right? All your revenue minus your operating expenses, and that's what you're left to do pretty much everything. Value the company, get a loan, do whatever, right? Things that are not included in a net operating income are some of the things that we talked about. Capital expenditures, that's not an operating expense. So that goes, when you do these spreadsheets, it goes before, after your net operating income, your capital expense. Now you may feel the pain, right? But the net operating income is still intact, but you're still having to pay for the roof, right? And then debt's not included. Debt service is not included in net operating income. Going back to some of the financial covenants that we talked about. A debt service coverage ratio. So you could never miss a payment, but you could fall below your debt service coverage ratio. In most cases, it's $1.25 to $1.35, right? So what that is your NOI is 1.25 times the debt payment. So it's got to be 125% more than what your annual debt payment is. So for an example, if your annual debt payment for a particular investment is 100,000, then your NOI in this particular case, if your debt service coverage ratio is about 25, is 125,000. Your net operating income has to be that much far over. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes, you need to collect more than what you're paying.
Right. But if you fall below, that's where you can get into default. Now, I've never missed a payment, but now I'm at $1.20. And the bank's like, well, what's going on? Annually. Annually.
Okay, all right.
They're gonna, no, they're they are going to monitor this. They are going to monitor this asset.
All right.
Yes. So be prepared to have your financial documents in place. All right. Let's see. Any questions out there in the Zoom land? I've seen like, anybody good? Okay.
What would they do if you fell below? If you're now not paying home?
Oh, well, they could do, they could do several things.
Even though you made your payment,
Even though you made your payment.
they force you to sell.
They can, there's what's called remedies to default.
Okay.
All those loan paper documents that nobody reads, when you sign a mortgage?
Well, in residential, when I say when they sign them, I always tell them this is your pay to stay document. Pay to stay. With commercial, it's not the same thing. Because if you pay, you don't necessarily get to stay.
It doesn't necessarily mean you don't either.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, it's not just like, okay, too bad, the thing's got to go.
right.
No, so there are remedies to get yourself back into that. So one of which could be you need to write us a check.
You're making blue.
not necessarily a balloon payment, but something to get you back into the deal, you know, like, so more skin in the game, and technically you're gonna be reducing your debt.
So that your percentage.
Yeah, so then you're gonna,
120, there's a 125, what does it take to make up?
Gotta make it-
There you go.
That's the order.
so it's gonna come off the hip,
Got it.
you know? There any, and those, I tell you what, man, nobody learns anything on the way up. The education is on the way down. And nobody knows a debt document when they're about to foreclose on you. You're pouring through that thing. That thing you just signed and popped the champagne, you know, at the closing table. Well, now you're sweating over it because something happened, something bad happened. And then you realize that they can increase your interest rate just like that.
So what is that?
It doesn't, well, but think, it doesn't,
But it doesn't help your debt.
no, it doesn't. But think about it like this, right? If you have bad credit, things like that, right? Not a whole lot of money. The bank is going to consider you high risk, right? But they're going to raise the interest rate. If you're got money, if you don't need money and you borrow it and you got great credit, they'll lower it. It's counterintuitive, but that's how they adjust for risk.
Well, that's it. Ever alone in the nation.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So it's kind of like, and I'll go back, because like when you're going to go to the bank and you don't want to have your hat in hand and tell you how bad things are, because they're going to tell you go away, right? Well, there's no way this person can pay it back. You know, why would I lend them money, right? So think about that real quick. Now think about a tenant, right? People go, oh, I don't want to show them a bunch of money and I don't want to do this and I don't want to tell them how good I am. And I go, well, act like you're going to the bank and try that same approach. They're not going to do anything for you, or they're going to increase the rate and they're not going to do much of anything. So when you talk to a tenant and you're going to the landlord, you want to show them that they got a bunch of money, business is great, and they'd be a fool not to rent to you for an X amount, because guess what? You don't rent to me, I'm going right down the street. Got already have an offer. They're like, okay, come over here. So, you know, if you do tenant rep, coach your tenants and saying, you need to put your best foot forward on this deal. Because a lot of people like, well, they won't give me a lot of tenant improvement allowance money if I show I have $1 million in cash. They'll just say, use your own money. And I go, no. They don't want you to go anywhere. They want you as a tenant. They want a very good tenant. And by the way, your cap rate is different than, you know, the guy that can barely, you know, make his payments. So that was a side note, but just to give you an idea. All right, debt constant. So debt constant is just the percentage you're going to pay on your debt for the entire loan, right? So if your interest rate is 6% and your amortization schedule is 25 years, then your debt constant is 7.73%. That's your annual debt payment every year, whether you pay, you know, down or not. So in other words, if you borrow 800,000 and you multiply that by your debt constant and divide that by 12, that's your monthly payment. There are a bunch of ways to get it, but knowing, you know, when you're doing a quick down and dirty, if you know how to calculate your debt constant real quick, you know, you can tell if an investment is really good or not, you know. And the shorter time, like if your amortization schedule was like, say 15, you know, 25, instead of 25, it'd be 15, then your debt constant is going to go up. Does that make sense? So, any other questions on that? We're getting close to the end, but I'm going to leave you with this. But don't worry, you don't have to know how to do any of this. Just refer it to me and get paid. So I was just, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how y'all do yours either, honestly. I mean, it's just so foreign to me, like how you do houses. It's so emotional and you can't quantify emotion. So I wouldn't even know how to value something. Like,
Well, if it
like
speaks to your heart, it's
I know, but where's that value? 100,000 more? 25,000, maybe 2,000? I have no idea. You know, like I can see my kids, you know, growing up in this house. All right, well, what's that worth you? Another 25 grand? You know, I don't know. So, yeah, so that's,
But the sofa will fit really nice, right?
Is it?
or maybe you don't get a sofa since you got to pay 25,000 more. Learn how to sleep in a sleeping bag.
Not a bad idea.
A different question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How do you convince the client, or what is the tax advantage of commercial based on investment or residential? What are the different advantages you can have?
Well, I mean, if you actually own the building, you can depreciate the asset.
In how many years is it depend? Your choice, 7 years, 10 years, 30 years, or?
It's 29.
29 is the shortest you can depreciate?
Yeah, the maximum.
Max, shortest time?
I don't know. Again, when you get into that sort of thing, I can give you the basics, but you need to talk to the accountant. Especially one of the other things you want to do, like if you're going to sell an asset, you know, a commercial asset, and they've been, you know, depreciating the asset over however long, you need to ask them to ask their accountant, if I sell this at this price, what am I expected to pay in taxes? And that might be a 3 or 4 day deal before the accountant can get back to you on that. But they need to know what they're facing as far as like a tax. And it's not just, you know, I bought it here and I'm selling it here and there's a capital gains of X. No, there's what's called recapture. And a lot of people don't take into the account recapture. And that's all the stuff that you've depreciated. Now the government wants back.
So, okay, so all of the write-off, you're gonna now say, oh, that.
Because you technically could sell it for less than you bought it and still owe taxes.
Not all of your write-off, what you wrote off depreciation.
What you wrote off your depreciation.
So can you think about that for a second? You could actually buy it for X and sell it for less and still pay taxes.
What if you do a 1031, you still pay?
No.
No, I mean, but that's kind of the next conversation. You know, like we had a client that they held their investment. I don't know how long. They didn't have any debt at the time of the sale, but you know, I did that very thing and said, look, check with your accountant. Said, hey, if you sell it at this, what you're facing. And it was over $350,000 in taxes. 350,000. They'd have to write the government a check.
How often do you do it?
Like, what do you mean? What's?
Like where you hold money in an intermediary and then use it towards another investment.
Oh yeah, as soon as it sells, like it goes to the qualified intermediary
Right.
and stays there until it's deployed to another asset. Or there is this: if you can't find a property, it still stays there for 180 days. You don't get it back until 180 days.
But you, do clients typically do that commercial?
Do what?
1031.
Oh yeah. When you're staring down the barrel of a gun and you see the bullet of $350,000, you're gonna do something.
Okay.
Because there's some people that, you know, sometimes, you know, it's just better. It is sometimes better just to pay the taxes in a lot of cases, just because the investments that are out there that would somehow work, they're not a good idea, right? It may seem good at the point, but sometimes it's just better to pay your
Still making a
taxes
profit.
and move on about your merry way, as opposed to buying a bad investment that's riddled with problems. You're continuing to feed, you know, the kitty, and at the end of the day, you cry uncle and you sell it for way less than, you know, and that's what you do. You help advise your client, you know, about, that's where you kind of come in. And just sometimes it's just basically laying out the scenarios and just saying, here's what could happen. And I'll assign a probability to each one of those scenarios. And then you kind of say, they'll always do this. Well, Cravens, this is your money. What would you do?
There's nothing called mortgage. Interest deduction and mortgage.
Yeah. You can deduct your interest. Sure. Sure. And that's another thing. I mean, when you talk about like the return that I was talking about, I was talking about basic return. If you did total return, it's going to be the deduction off your interest, depreciation, and then your principal reduction on your loan. I mean, I wouldn't really go into that unless it's, unless they want you to do it. Then you, all right, but here it is.
Is there a special software or mortgage calculator you have for this stuff?
Yeah, it's called a spreadsheet that I do.
Great spreadsheet.
Again, not to worry about all that.
Right over there.
What's that? There you go. That's it. And you get paid.
10 out of 10, highly recommend.
Yeah. Just to leave you with a parting thought, like this guy in the North Atlanta office, he referred me to a deal, and it was a tenant rep deal. Okay. And I didn't tell him how much it was. I mean, I told him you'll get 25%, right? But I didn't tell him how much it would be. And when he got the check, he goes, you know what? I was going to go out for a nice dinner, but now I'm thinking I'm going to help, fund my kids' college education. Yeah. Give him a jump start. So.
Clients do you have? What is your, varies, but you have a
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a few tenant clients, that
That's the
Um,
way, right?
tenant rep is one of the main things that I do. Like finding space for people. But I mean, they come to me to sell their investments too. So, but tenant rep is mainly what I like to do. And one of the main things I like about tenant rep is like, you hear, the headlines of how the economy's doing. Well, I have a pretty diverse client base, and I like to listen to them, like talk to them, like, hey, how's business? What do you see? What's going on? And a lot of the times you'll hear doom and gloom, in the news, and all my clients are doing are expanding. So that's what I go. That's what I go by.
do you see the commercial market coming down because of this? Or it's not crazy as residential, but it's still stable, except for office. I know people are.
I mean, that's kind of the question mark, but for the most part, no, I mean, it's still going,
What's the typical appreciation you think of?
What's that?
What's the typical appreciation of property you think of on the commercial side?
Again, there's so many factors, that come into play. Like, I mean, if you had Amazon, in one of your warehouses, that's going to appreciate way more than, some mom and pop. You know what I mean? Just because the dependability of the cash flow and things like that. I mean, I think if you were going to, like do all the projections and then you layer it with, just an overall annual increase of 3 or 5%, I wouldn't go over 5% and just see how that looks. I certainly wouldn't do anything like 10 and no double digits. No, that would be suicide. I mean, it may work that way and then you just pleasantly surprised, but I would project. Yeah, I have some indirect investments in self-storage and stuff. Like, yeah, I mean, if like people that want to pool their money together and stuff like that and invest in things. It depends on the appetite, and like some of these things, you have to do Reg D things, and you have to be an accredited investor, and so because there's disclosures that you have to make, on certain investments if you're taking people's money and investing it. You know, you don't want to have to do a full blown and you don't have to do a full blown prospectus and then have to file with the SEC. You don't want to do that. Because guess what? You just painted a target on your back. Wait, Cravens is doing what? I remember when it was at a car wash. Let's go take a look. So,
You more on the listing side or just tenant?
I do a little bit of both. I do, but I would say 90% of what I do is tenant rep, and the rest of the 10 is between listings and investment sales. Most of it is like 1031 money placement. That sort of thing. So yeah, okay. Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
I understood about a quarter of it. So glad that you do.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad y'all do what y'all do.
But it's good to like learn, like just to get an idea. just to,
Yeah,
Like,
and just so you know, there are a lot of the similarities, like when you, like if you're looking at a residential house as an investment, a lot of the same numbers and same things happen. You know what I mean?
yeah. 'Cause
Like-
I mean, all of my investor clients that buy student housing, an apartment, we still look at all.
Yeah, you look at that. Yeah, and even if you were just going to buy like an investment property, let's say a home, and rent it out, you would look at the same kind of matrix. You know, it's just commercial is just basically all investment. And even if you, one thing I would tell, like a little tidbit would be, let's say you have a business and you want to own it, right? And you want to operate your business out of it. Buy it in one entity and rent it or lease it to another entity. So you take advantage of both, you know, because rent payment is 100% deductible. And then you have, you know, the other entity that takes advantage of the asset itself.
So basically you own the asset and become a tenant for yourself.
Yeah.
That's
That's what Nancy does, right?
Huh?
That's what Nancy does on her building at United, right? She bought it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a different, yeah. You would always do that. Yeah, most, yeah. And then you set up a lease payment that you would do. Yeah. Yeah. Most, and not, I mean, once you're in that game, you know to do that. But, you know, for somebody that's just starting out, you know, you suggest to them, this is what I would do, kind of thing. So, yeah. All right, any questions out there in Zoom land? All good? All right, well then I'll end it, and y'all just email me if y'all have any questions or if you want a copy of the slide.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, bye.